Hello and welcome to another episode of Global Duologue. My guest for today's episode is Mr. Gautam Chikermane. He is a former journalist, an author, and is currently Vice President of the Observer Research Foundation, which is a leading think tank. He has written 8 books on subjects ranging from economic policy to political upheaval and has analyzed in detail the growth of the Indian economy and the evolution of reforms. At ORF, he leads the research on economics, politics, and foreign policy. Welcome, Mr. Chikermane, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Namaste.
You have been a journalist, authored several books, and are currently Vice President of Observer Research Foundation. What is the interplay between these various roles?
Oh, it's a very existential and a very defining question. Let me begin by theory, which is that as a person evolves through his or her lifetime, things keep changing. There are very few people who keep doing the same thing. I'm certainly not one of them. I enjoy doing different kinds of things. I began as a journalist, then I've written books, and now at a think tank. The common thread binding them is writing, thinking. But the kind of writing changes. For instance, in journalism, the writing, let's say there are 3 kinds of writing, which is 4 kinds. Maybe there is a personal blog. There is journalism, where some bit of fact checking you do. You ask various people for their inputs. There is books, and there is think tank, and finally there is the university. So these are the 5 kinds of or 6 kinds of thinking. A think tank is situated between journalism and university. It does a lot of policy work, in some way binds cutting edge research for the common person without being instant or trying to be very fast. It's a deep thought that goes into writing for a think tank versus, let us say, writing for a newspaper. And then you have to have far greater rigor, and you need to know more and more about less and less when you write for in academia. A think tank is that particular place between a journalism, a newspaper, and an academia. And it's a nice, comfortable place to evolve or think about ideas, throw new ideas into the system, get their response, and fine-tune policy.
Thank you for that insight. So, in an article on what to expect in 2024, you wrote it will usher in a trickier and edgier world where tensions will begin between states, but whose impact will be felt strongest on companies, workers, and citizens. How do you see the intersection of business and international relations shaping global dynamics, especially at a time when the world is on edge due to multiple flashpoints?
When I wrote this article, there was only one edgy thing happening, which is the Russia-Ukraine war. But after I wrote it, now it has expanded into Israel-Gaza, and now Iran is getting into it. So the whole West Asian area is getting more volatile. While I might say that, yeah, it's great that I predicted this will happen, and it has happened, I'm not really happy with my prediction. I'm not happy that my prediction has come true. I would have preferred a more peaceful world, a more a calmer world, a more harmonious world. But that was not to be. But how it affects companies is that because nations fight, there are various tools of war that they use, for instance, sanctions. And in the Russia-Ukraine war, the United States had put out sanctions against Russian oil, Russian gas. India continued to get it. By the way, EU also continues to buy Russian gas even today. After giving us lectures on democracy and financing the war, financing Russia against Europe, it seems their money doesn't go into financing the war. Only Indian money goes into financing that war. As a result, had we been forced to work on the sanctions, the price of oil would have gone up, the economy would have slowed down, there would have been a heavy burden on various companies, various individuals who need oil, for example. I'm just talking about oil. Inflation would rise because of higher oil prices. So I think when nations fighting is very easy, but the implications down the line are much harder. Perhaps they are meant to be. Perhaps the West wants to sort of punish Russia, so that it behaves itself or it ends the war and so on. But in the process, it is hurting companies, it is hurting citizens, it is hurting consumers, it harms the people. That's the point I was making.
So, like you mentioned, the Russia-Ukrainian war has expanded to the West Asian tension. Do you think India has navigated this well?
I think so, yes. I think as the world's fifth largest economy today, and soon to be the third largest, India has been able to negotiate its place with comfort. We are talking about our national interest, India's national interest, rather than working towards or trying to align with this side or that side. Further, it is not simply an economic tool. I think India is also pressing for peace. It's not an insignificant player. Our voice is important. And from Ukraine to Israel, everybody has said that India could help ease the war. There is an international relations dynamic also playing. Geopolitics, of course, works out in the sense, like I just talked about buying oil, for instance. But it's more the international relations where the voice of India is being heard with some respect, with some credibility. And I think taking all these together, India has negotiated this point very well. Of course, the economy gives us the power, the force, and the moral part of our international relations has always been there. It's just that we are able to establish it with more conviction right now.
Your book, Reform Nation, From the Constraints of P.V. Narasimha Rao to the Convictions of Narendra Modi, chronicles the evolutions of reforms in India. Tell us about how reforms in India have evolved and what more needs to be done to encourage both foreign and domestic investment.
That's a whole book. So for me to encapsulate it in 2 or 3 minutes is going to be difficult. But let's just say that the first 44 years of India till 1991 were years where the Indian economy was deformed. Between 1953 and 1980, for any problem that India had, there was only one policy answer: nationalization. You had a problem with banks, nationalize banks. You had a problem in textile mills, nationalize textile mills. You had a problem with airlines, nationalize airlines, and so on and so forth. Uh, from 1980 onwards, there was a period of pause. Some kind of policy repairs happened, but you cannot call them reforms. Reforms began in 1991 under Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, and they have continued right till Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In fact, uh, Prime Minister Narasimha Rao's reforms came with a lot of constraints because India was facing a balance of payments crisis. India was forced to reform. The next prime ministers, notably Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, they also reformed economy in their own way, but they had constraints. They had political constraints. So they reformed with caution. They would take one step forward, move sideways, accommodate the opposition, accommodate their own partners, and so on. Under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, what I see is that there is a political force and an economic conviction. Both of them have come together. And the reforms that you have seen over the past 10 years have come with a far greater conviction than any other prime minister earlier. His ability to negotiate across political spectrums is good. He's a good negotiator. But during the past 10 years, you have also seen a lot more fissures, a polarization of politics. So I really don't know whether he would have been able to do. But the good thing is he has done it. And let's see where the next government formation happens and how they take the reforms forward.
So, tell me, Mr. Chikermane, how does an evolving geopolitical landscape impact business strategies and investment decisions, particularly for multinational corporations operating in diverse markets? Is India well placed to attract investments from MNCs looking to diversify the supply chains?
India is getting ready. And for instance, the corporate refugees from China, their first port of call is right now Vietnam rather than India. India is also getting there. And I think this is a great opportunity for India to enter the supply chains. But China as a global manufacturing hub is huge. To shift from there is going to be very difficult, just as Germany is finding out. And in fact, the cross-fertilization of money from here to there and there back is so deep that Germany or Europe, I would say, is almost frozen into submission before China. So it's going to take some time. But that was the case with Russian gas as well for Europe. They were dependent on Russia for their gas. They have been. And suddenly, when Russia attacked Ukraine, they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what hit them. They are used to cheap gas, cheap energy prices. All their focus is on welfare politics. Give more to the citizens, more public transport, more healthcare facilities, and so on and so forth. But financing them has been a challenge. And now, when suddenly Russia is attacking them, and America is saying that pay up your bills of 2% of your GDP, suddenly they seem to be all scattered. Likewise for China. And I think in all this, India has been slowly getting ready for this, at least at a policy level. I think there are many more reforms to go. The good thing is that the current government is sincere about these reforms. It is reforming.
What policies does India need to implement to be ready for supply chains?
I think India needs to focus on manufacturing, creating manufacturing hubs. It's not just giving one company or two companies. For instance, if Tesla decides to enter India to make electronic cars, it's not just Tesla. Along with Tesla will come another dozens of companies who will be supplying to Tesla in order to create the cars. Those cars can be sold in India. They may be sold abroad. So India could be a consumer as well as a manufacturing hub, which is exactly what China has done. By the way, China is not very happy that Tesla is deciding to come to India, and it's going to put all the pressure that it can. But let's see how the Indian government negotiates this, how Elon Musk negotiates this. It's a good thing that this is coming, but this just follows the footsteps of Apple earlier. And Apple follows the footsteps of Google earlier. And Google follows the footsteps of Microsoft earlier. So you can see little by little, one by one, large corporations are coming into India, setting up service bases, setting up manufacturing bases, Hyundai, for instance, Maruti, for instance. And gradually, I think this should reach a critical point from where I would say it will attract, it will become a virtuous cycle of more and more investment and stronger supply chains.
At a time when exports will be an important aspect of India's growth agenda, how can Indian businesses continue to navigate access to key international markets when several countries are looking to protect their domestic industry?
I would say that quality, R&D, and innovation. If companies look at these 3 points, I think they would be able to enter the global markets. Price, of course, is an issue, and Indian businesses have various constraints around pricing also. But I think price in a market of tomorrow is going to be incidental. I think if Indian businesses can deliver quality, world-class quality, then I don't see any reason why any country would not permit or reduce the barriers. Now, barrier reduction is a G to G, which is a government to government engagement. And countries that we point to saying that they have raised barriers point at us saying that Indian barriers are already high. So this negotiation will take place at WTO or bilaterally between countries. But as far as corporations go, I think they can transcend these issues provided they can give world-class quality at world-class scale at decent prices. So I would say that Indian businesses need to think more about R&D, think more creatively rather than simply adapting foreign technologies. Maybe it should become a creator of technologies, a creator of products. And you have a huge market in India itself that you can experiment with and try out various things in different ways. Indian consumers are already buying global goods. Why can't they buy Indian goods? So I think these are the questions that industry needs to introspect and answer.
ORF is known for its well-researched reports on geopolitics. How can businesses leverage such insights to navigate a complex world and identify opportunities? Also, does ORF play a role in facilitating dialogue between policymakers and businesses to address global challenges and foster economic growth?
So for the first part of your question, companies can simply read the reports that we write, and they will get a working knowledge of what's happening in various issues. These reports could be geographical, as in Europe, China, America. They could be sectoral. It could be something like energy, technology. or they could be a wide angle reports, let us say on employment, future of work, and so on. So reading would be the first part. Second, as far as platforms go, ORF already provides the platforms for not only Indian, but for global discourses. Through our Raemana dialogue, we get people from all over the world. They are foreign ministers, defense ministers, leaders of large corporations, executives, think tankers, economists, geopolitics, expertise people. We are already providing such platforms. To say that we are providing platform to a particular company or an issue, that's not what ORF does. ORF is an open source. It's a wide tent where people can come, discuss, engage, critique, and take back learnings from there. I would say as India rises from 4 trillion approximately today to become the world's third largest economy in the next 2 years and 10 trillion by 2032, you will see a deeper footprint of such engagements through ORF. And on our part, we try to bring in all the issues, all the stakeholders from every side to a common platform. So to answer your question, we are already providing the platforms and we will continue to do so. How you engage with it depends on how much you can partake from it.
Thank you for that interesting insight. So, the bilateral relationship between India and the United States has evolved into a strategic partnership, even as they engage in various multilateral groupings as well. What is the significance this holds, and how can India leverage this to its maximum potential?
I think by simply getting more strong, whenever a country rises, the rise of every country attracts all kinds of critiques from everywhere, from vested interests. So, along with the G to G, which is government to government handshake with India and America, it is powered further by B to B, which is business to business handshakes between Indian companies and American companies. It is also fired by C to C, which is consumer to consumer engagement, citizen to citizen engagements. The only 2 points that are lagging behind right now are the media, which is heavily left dominated, and the academia, which again is very left dominated. But overall, in my opinion, this is a step-by-step process where the governments are in tune, the corporations are in tune, the citizens are in tune, just the media and the academia is off tune. They will reform very soon. As soon as India touches 7 trillion, you will see the discourse change. So I think perhaps India needs to wear a thick skin while continuing to engage deeply. Now, what America may want is open markets. Our markets are open. What America may want is the technological governance system that it has to be operated into India. That's not going to happen. India will have its own technological regulatory framework to which American companies will have to function if they wish to be in India. So these are sovereign issues. And I think these kind of tensions will continue. But the overall direction of this relationship, India-US relationship, both at an economic, at a diaspora, at a strategic defense level, is moving fast. And I think it's good not only for America and for India, I think it's good for the world.
Thank you. So, you were part of a band called Horizon during your college days and are a student of Drupal music. What policy announcement or economic data will have you humming your favorite tune?
Okay, let me start counting. The first is compliance reforms, where ease of doing business increases. Today, we have about 26,136 compliances on which a person can be jailed. Those need to be changed. The change has begun with Jan Vishwas Bill Part 1 that came last year. Jan Vishwas Bill Part 2 is on its way, and perhaps Jan Vishwas 3 will complete this cycle. So compliance reforms is number 1, and it's on its way. Labor reforms is number 2, where the 29 labor laws have been converted into 4 labor codes, but not yet been notified. Since it's a concurrent subject, the states have to be taken on board. At some point, this will happen, and I would like to see those reforms come through. Our assessment is that compliance burden on companies will fall further with these labor reforms. It will give greater flexibility, and it will create far more jobs than they are today. The third reform that I would like to see is agricultural reforms, but I think we can say goodbye to that, because the politics of agriculture reforms is I mean, you need to be a Superman to negotiate this. And I don't think any government would be able to do, given the kind of rhetoric and the kind of falsities that can come through and the media can play with, that prevent this from happening. So agricultural reforms will not happen. As a result, agricultural labor, marginal farmers will continue to suffer. So the new government should be able to create some openings where poor farmers can do very well. Land reforms, like agricultural reforms, is out of question. Again, it's an emotive, rhetorical subject. But I think there is enough land with public sector undertakings, with the army, railways, which can be used if India wants to be a manufacturing base. That would be a good thing. And I think civil services reforms are desperately needed. I don't think with the kind, if we are looking to be a $10 trillion economy, we cannot ride it on a colonial civil services. It will have to be a nationalistic civil services built by national ideals on national issues. Finally, we need judicial reforms, because most of the reforms that happen, the courts are too slow to deliver. There are hurdles before contracts that happen. And I think the judiciary needs to introspect on the manner in which it selects itself. And I think those debates are going on. But when this will happen, we don't know, because again, it's a very fiery subject. So I would assume this is a 50-50 chance. Maybe they'll take 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards. For instance, judges even today do not disclose their incomes. It's a small thing. They have been advised to, but judges don't. And these reforms are necessary to bring greater credibility into the judiciary. So these 7 reforms, what will make me sing my tune.
That's an exhaustive list, sir. I have one last question. Given our position on the world stage today, do you believe India is now able to hold its ground more than ever before in negotiations across borders?
Yes, we are. If you're talking borders in terms of China border or Pakistan border, I think Pakistan has become irrelevant. China, we are facing eye to eye. I don't think there's any problem there. But there are other negotiations that happen, for instance, at the United Nations, at WTO, and there too, India has been able to hold its own. I think it has been holding its own for a long time, but today it's able to do so with greater force. I just spoke to you about how India is buying Russian oil despite sanctions of the West. So I think India is moving forward, and the rest of the world, notably the West, is responding positively. I think India is not only rising, it is also presenting a new way of international relations. And I think let's see how this plays out over the next decade. But I am hopeful.
Thank you for your time today. Your insights on a wide range of topics, especially the evolution of reforms in India, were very interesting and throw light on India's rise as an economic power. I'm sure my viewers will appreciate the pioneer nuances you brought throughout your responses. Thank you, Mr. Chikermane.
Thank you. Namaste.